student. Today we will revise chapter 11, light, shadow and reflection. So student, do you remember what is the meaning of light? Already we learned about that. Light means things through which we can see anything and anything is visible. So also we show about shadow and reflection. So first we revise topic light. So student, light is the natural agent that stimulate sight and makes things visible. It means student, when light come from any agent, any natural agent, and they make anything is visible. So for example, if we say that sun, so sun is a natural agent and they can stimulate sight and make anything is visible on the earth. Its path is only visible when it is scattered by dust particles present in the atmosphere. So when we saw the light of sun, so when sun rays is coming from sun and coming through a path only visible when it is scattered by the dust particle. Light is a form of invisible energy, so we call that light of any natural object is invisible energy. Light itself is not visible, but it make other object visible. So we say that sometimes sun has their own light, but uh, it not visible itself, it make another object visible. Next, light and the eyes both are necessary to see the things. So we know that student, only eyes is not necessary or only light is not necessary to see anything. But when light and eyes both are uh, compared to each other, it means connected each other, and that's why we can see anything. The sensation which help us to see things is called sight or the vision. So through which help of any sensation, so is called this thing is called sight or vision. Now next topic, sources of light. So we say that some natural sources and some man-made sources. So in which we say that sun, star are the some natural sources and they can give us light, and some man-made sources like electronic torch, candle flame, bulb, tube lights. So many are the man-made sources, and also these all are the source of light. Next, student, we already learned that light is classified into two types of. So first is emission of light. It means classifying object on the basis of emission of light, and in which we say two type of object. First is luminous objects and the second is non-luminous object. So luminous object means object which emit their own light are called luminous object. It means any object are luminous their own light, they can visible with their own light. For example, a candle flame, electronic torch. So this type of object is called luminous object. Next is non-luminous objects. So it means object which do not have their own light and are seen by the light scattered by them are called non-luminous object. It means some object have no their own light, but they all are visible through another object. So another luminous object is called non-luminous object. For example, we can say that our moon has no their own light, but they can visible through a sunlight. So that's why a moon is a non-luminous object. Next is chair. table, it means they have not their own light, but whenever sun rays or a torch rays or a candle flame rays are coming on chair, on table, so these all are object we can see. So this type of object is called non-luminous object. Next, student, optical media. So here you can see that any substance which allows light to pass through it either partially or wholly is called an optical media. It means we already learned, student, about some object, type of object. It means transparent, translucent, opaque object. So these are called optical media. Why optical media? Because any substance are allows light to pass through them partially, either completely. So this type of media is called optical media. And in which, student, first is, you can see that about transparent object. So do you remember, student, what is the definition of transparent object? It means all the substance that allow light to pass freely through them and through which object can clearly be seen are called transparent substance. Student, sometimes some substance are allow light to pass through them freely. Freely means no any another disturbance between the path, between to pass out the light. And I think all rays are passed through this object, so that's why this type of object is called transparent substance. For example, glass, it means clear glass, we can see that one side from another side. Water, clean air also is the example of transparent object, because clean water is a transparent object. We can see that sometime if we fill a clean water in bucket and put anything in the bottom of bucket, so we can see from upper side to lower side, upper side to bottom, what is the things inside. So clear water is also called transparent object. And air, so you know that in the atmosphere air is all time present, so we always see one side to another side and between the layer of air, but sometimes dust particles are present in air, so that time we cannot see clearly any object. So dirty air is not a transparent object. Okay, student, so do you remember the definition of transparent object? Now again we revise all the substance that allow light to pass freely through them and through which object can clearly be seen are called transparent substance. Next type is translucent object. So student, remember that in a transparent object we can see clearly, but in a translucent object we can through partially, it means some light. So what is the perfect definition of translucent? So remember, student, a substance that allows light to pass through it only partially is called translucent medium or substance. It means we can see but not clearly, some partial object see. So this type of substance, this type of medium is called translucent object. For example, butter paper, tissue paper, etc. So student, do you remember when mummy makes some cake or any other item, so they sprayed first butter paper on the bottom of any vessel. So sometimes you see that butter paper, it like some oily paper, and through which we cannot see clearly from one side to another side. We see but not clearly. So that's why butter paper is called translucent object. Second example, tissue paper. Same as butter paper, tissue paper is also a not clearly transparent, through which we can see partially. So this type of material substance is called translucent object. So again we revise. Please listen carefully. The definition of translucent: a substance that allows light to pass through it only partially is called a translucent medium or substance. For example, butter paper or tissue paper. Now next object is opaque object. So student, transparent and translucent, opaque object is opposite from both the material, both the substance. So object that do not allow light to pass through them is called opaque object. For example, we can see that book, bricks or many another object through which we cannot see anything. It means light is not passed through them. So this type of object is called opaque object. So student, remember the definition of three substance, three medium or object: transparent, translucent and opaque. Now next is about second topic, shadow. So what is shadow? A shadow is the region of absence of light, and the light from a source is cut off by an obstacle and shadow is formed. So when student, light is come through any object, but in some region light is absent, so at that time light from a source is cut off. So for only those part shadow is formed. For three objects, student, remember that opaque object cast a dark shadow because we cannot see anything through opaque object. So that's why through opaque object shadow is very dark. Next is about translucent object. So translucent object produce a weak shadow because we see only some light. It means a small portion of any object through one side to another side in translucent object. So translucent object produce a weak shadow. And another object, transparent object, do not cast a shadow at all because student, transparent object allow light pass through them completely. So that's why we cannot cast a shadow through transparent object. So remember student, opaque object cast a dark shadow because they cannot allow a light pass through them. Translucent object produce a weak shadow because they allow light partially through them. And next is transparent object do not cast a shadow at all because transparent object allow light to pass through them completely. So that's why student, remember here is 3 point about three objects and their shadow. Now next topic, types of shadow. So student, the kind of shadow depends upon the size of the source of light. It means shadow depends on the size of source of light. First, due to smaller light source, it means only pointed source of light. So only one dark shadow is formed and this is known as umbra. So student, remember this word. When only smaller light shadow, smaller point we can see anywhere, So this type of dark shadow is formed and is known as umbra. Next is through a larger light source. It means two shadows are formed, a dark one in the center and a light one on the outer side. So when student a larger light source, it means sometimes we say that a headlight of a big vehicles like a tempo or train, so they can produce a dark one shadow in center and a light one on the outer side of the circle. So the dark part is called umbra and the front or lighter shadow is called penumbra. So student, remember that here is two word. First is about first is about dark shadow and second is about lighter shadow. So what is the word for dark shadow? Umbra, and the lighter shadow penumbra. Next, the size of umbra decreases and penumbra increases as the screen is moved away from the object. It means student, when screen is moved away from the object source of light, so at that time umbra, it means dark shadow, is decrease and penumbra is increase. It means light shadow is increases when screen moved away from the object. So when student, for example, first vehicle is stopped at any point and if headlight is on, so at that time we can see umbra and penumbra clearly. But when vehicle is going far away from this point, so at that time penumbra decreases and penumbra increases. It means dark shadow is decreases and the light shadow is increases, and after some time we cannot see any portion of shadow. So student, remember through an example, so you remember this portion. Next is about color of shadow. So what is the color of shadow? Whatever be the color of the opaque object, the shadow formed is always on the same color, and that is black. So students, sometimes we see that some object is colorful like red, like yellow or like green, but all the object, shadow of all the object is only in one color, and that is black. So remember student, color of shadow is always black for all the object. Now next is student about length of the shadow. So what is the length of shadow for all the object? The length of the shadow depends upon the angle at which light falls on a body. So length of shadow is depend on the angle of object, and light differ from on object. So for here is example student, eclipse, and we all are knowing about eclipse. What is the eclipse? So it we can see between moon and sun, earth and moon. So sometime shadow formed in space that make the sun or moon invisible for some time. So at that time eclipse is the overshading of a bright object. So first, if we talk about solar eclipse. So what is the solar eclipse? And sometime you see that the moon come between sun and earth, and so that the earth darkness during the day. It means shadow is coming to between sun and earth. So that's why we cannot see a sun during even a day. So this is called solar eclipse. So sometimes solar eclipse occurs only on a new moon day. Next type is lunar eclipse. It means moon and the sun are in a straight line such that earth is in the between the sun and the moon. So that's why the shadow of earth falls on moon and the moon cannot be seen. So this is called a lunar eclipse, and lunar eclipse occurs on a full moon night. So remember student, two example here is about the length of shadow. Next and last topic of this chapter is about reflection of light. So student, in this chapter we learn only the definition of reflection of light, but in the next standard we will study in deeply about reflection of light. So why this process is being, and what is the reason for reflection of light, and how can we see any object. So the process of sending back the light rays which falls on the surface of an object, it means silver metal is one of the best reflector of light. So student, remember that perfect definition of reflection of light. It means the process of sending back the light rays which fall on the surface of the object. So this process is called reflection of light. So sometimes student, we see that we can see any object. So what is the process to see object through light? So remember student, if sun ray is coming from sun and fall on any object, and at that time we can see this object. So what is the reason to see this object student? So sun rays come to this object and this ray is reflected from this point and coming in our eyes, and that's why we can able to see any object. So in this process we can see the reflection of light, and that's why we can see anything because of reflection of light. So remember student, silver metal is one of the best reflector of light. Thank you.